So my name is Emily Agnello. I am the graduate program recruiter here at LMU. So I recruit for all of LMU's graduate programs, but I do have special interest in our receiver College of Science and Engineering program. So I do majority of the recruitment and work with students through the admissions process who are applying to our science and engineering graduate programs. So today we have our civil engineering and environmental science graduate program director, Dr. Donald Kendall, with us. Let me let Ingrid get connected to audio. Okay, so we have Dr. Donald Kendall with us, and I'm going to go ahead and start by kind of asking him to introduce himself, and I have some planned questions for him to answer so you can get to know him and our programs a little bit better. And at the end, I'm going to open up to anyone who may have questions for him. Can I really ask anything? We really want you to learn more about our programs, the research, and the great experiences you can get at LMU while in our graduate programs. And Dr. Kendall is in charge of both of our civil engineering and our environmental science programs. The programs go hand in hand, but he is the man who's in charge of both of them. So to get started, Dr. Kendall, if you want to go ahead and kind of tell us all a little bit about yourself, about your background, your LMU background, as you're an alumni too.
Sure. So anyway, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here to speak with potential students. And I was an LMU graduate. Interesting background was I graduated from LMU with a degree really in mechanical engineering. And when I graduated, I went to work in aerospace, which was still very thriving back then, as well as it is today. And worked for a number of years, quite interesting projects involving propulsion, rockets, heat shields, all kinds of interesting work. And one day I was asked to help out on a contamination problem, and which is totally new to me. And it had to do with some contamination on a military base and groundwater contamination. And more importantly, they wanted to find a way to remove the contaminant from the groundwater. And that is what opened my eyes to the environment. From that point forward, I learned all about water pollution, sources of water, and scarcity of water, and how easily it can become contaminated and polluted, and the extreme damage it does to our communities. And from there, I changed my professional path to one of traditional civil engineering, water resources track, environmental track, and went on to get my PhD at UCLA, and then came back to LMU as a professor for a time, and then teaching as an adjunct professor for over 20 years. Eventually, I did take a professional career managing a water district and also working at a large water wholesaler for a number of years, and still consult to this day on those areas. But so my background is somewhat non-traditional. But as I look back on the students that I've had the pleasure to teach at LMU over the years, many of our grad students come from a variety of backgrounds. And having been at different graduate schools, what makes LMU sort of interesting to me is that we have a place for those students. We have a place for them to kind of find their way to pursue their environmental or their water resources or civil engineering interests. And that's been the success of our program over the years. We have a tremendous alumni following. We have access to professionals that are LMU grads in our field. And I obviously still maintain those contacts as well. So that's just a short history of my background.
Wonderful. So Can you speak on why you decided really to go into academia, why you decided to, start teaching and becoming a professor?
Yes. Well, it's interesting. I think is with all the professors here at LMU, it was a desire to want to teach and sort of pass on what knowledge I had learned to other students. And I can tell you, working professionally, anything that's gone wrong has happened to me. And if a project was going to blow up in your face, it's blown up in mine. And the one thing I've tried to tell students over the years, here's what can go wrong, and here's what happened to me. And I try to share that experience. And it could be anywhere from a water quality situation to a structural problem, to a pipeline in the street blowing up, problems with recycled water lines, whatever. And that was sort of the motivation, I think, to stay in academia, because it offers sort of an applied perspective, right? We all learn theory and we practice theory, but ultimately from engineering to me is like applied physics. Environmental engineering is like applied physics. And that's really what kept me going. And so for all these years, while I worked professionally, I put as a condition of my employment that I be able to teach at LMU. And I did. And I'm happy to have done it. I've met just amazing people over the years.
That definitely leads me to my next question about what is your favorite part about teaching and working at LMU? And then what would you say some of your greatest achievements from being at LMU are?
Okay, that's a good question. Well, clearly, not only the professors have a shared passion with LMU, because LMU is a Jesuit school, and one common theme that reigns with our faculty and with our students is that we're committed to service to others. And in this kind of field, the very nature of your job is that. And knowing that your colleagues share that same feeling makes it a very attractive place to want to be. And the students that I have met over the years, who I still keep in touch with, share that same passion. And I think they see that in the professors that they have. And that's really what would stand out. When I look at the greatest accomplishments, it's my students. I just had the opportunity to see a student 2 nights ago who was appointed by President Biden in an important job and working on the border issues and water issues. And she came and spoke to everyone, and she credited her professional success to her degree at LMU. That to me is, what we all hope our students will achieve, and we're glad to do it. So that's the way it would stand out to me.
That's wonderful. So I know besides you being in the environmental science and civil engineering department, you have a lot of wonderful coworkers and other professors that you have the pleasure of working with. Do you want to elaborate and talk a little bit more about them?
Yes, I'd like to share my screen, if that's okay. So I'm going to pull up a slide here, and pardon my the Zoom message is right on top of my slide. Okay, there we go. I want to talk to you about some of our faculty at LMU in the civil engineering environmental science area. These are all just exceptionally qualified individuals who share the same passion and commitment that I mentioned to you earlier. And I'll start off with our full-time faculty. And at the top of our list there, we have Rachel Adams. Professor Adams did her work out of MIT, and she's an environmental scientist, environmental engineer. Her background was in chemical engineering, and then she started specializing in freight and transport and other very interesting topics, and deals with both contamination on the ground. She's presently doing some work with the Navy and some water quality work involving the ocean and contaminant issues there. And very interested in her students and very committed, and a pleasure to work with. We have a professor emeritus, John Dorsey, big environmental science professor, still in our program, who did a lot of work on coastal processes. Okay? Excellent professor, very easy to work with, likes working with students in the field. We have Professor Jeremy Powell, who was our former grad director. He's on sabbatical right now, he'll be back in the fall. Professor Powell also is an LMU graduate, and his graduate work is out of MIT, and really has been quite involved in global climate modeling and studying the impacts of climate change, both natural and anthropogenic, on water resources. And that's where we shared a common interest. Some of my first publications were the early 90s with the Association for the Advancement of Science on that exact issue, and a very difficult issue. And he is very active in that area, probably our most well-published professor and probably most well-known out in those circles because he touches such a wide audience, and real pleasure to work with. We have Professor Joseph Reichenberger, Marquette graduate, professional engineer. And Professor Reichenberger, to me, is the consummate professional engineer. Holds a number of registrations. He's an expert in water quality, water resources, really has been there and done that. He has seen so much, and he not only works in our grad program, but he essentially handles all of the design projects for our undergrads as they get out. And just a wealth of knowledge, and just a pleasure to have in our department. And the students really benefit from his knowledge and tremendous contacts. Bill Trott. Bill Trott is out of UCLA. He's been with us for a number of years. He committed to LMU. I actually had Professor Trott when I was a student here. So he must have been like 12 years old or something when I had him as a professor. I just didn't realize it then, because he still looks the same, very active. One of the things that he brings to the program, besides his expertise in fluid mechanics, is also his work in engineering economics. And we've managed to mold that into some different courses as we sort of look at the economic impacts of the kind of problems that we have today, obviously in the world. One of our newer professors is Professor Joseph Weber. Joseph Weber is a geotech specialist. And if you live in California, he was working on the Orville problem. There was a failure of the spillway there in Orville, and Professor Weber was working on that problem, and teaches geology in our department and other courses, and wealth of knowledge, still active as a consultant. Many of our professors also still consult, so you're seeing people in their element. On the structural side, we have Professor Sinead Kim. Professor Sinead Kim, she's a registered structural engineer. That's very rare actually in California. There's a lot of registered professional engineers, as we all are, but she has one level of registration above that. And she is top of her field in this area, and brings a lot to our program. Now, for our adjunct faculty, We have a number of professors that stand out, but some of our regular ones would be Professor Haag, who worked for years at the LA County Sanitation District, quite well known, and still teaches in our program. Professor Dennis Casper, LMU graduate, Caltech, PhD, membrane expert, water quality. He brings all that to his classes. We have Marcia Ferreira, works professionally at the Metropolitan Water District. Mihuan Park, who teaches a remote sensing class for us, was out of UCLA. Frank Capone, also with LA County, expert in air pollution and control. And so these are some of our professors on a regular basis that are here at LMU with our students. All of them bring a very unique perspective to the courses. And so that's my quick rundown of who we have. And they're all more eloquent than I am, by the way.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing all the information about them. My next question for you is, so what types of student research do you see the students in these programs doing? And is there anything specifically that, or any specific like theses that you supervise or that you work on with students?
Yeah, so I'm working with several students right now, and I've had the opportunity to work with others. And they have been varied. I tend to specialize in the climate modeling, water resources side, and other professors will get more involved in the water treatment processes, like membrane processes, for example. And so I have one student right now who's looking at sea level rise and its impact on coastal flooding in urbanized areas of Southern California and associated economic impacts, right? Now, traditionally, would you see that in an engineering program? Maybe not, but you would see it here. It brings up quite a number of other issues. It touches really at the heart of who is bearing the brunt of those expenses as these occur. What parts of Southern California are affected more than others? And of course, besides studying just the likelihood of these things happening, that's just one project. I have another student who is interested in forecasting. So we talk about forecasting. There are different ways to forecast. So the old method would be you plot up some data and try to extrapolate the data with a graph, right? But those times have changed, and we're now in a whole different world where we're really utilizing our grad students, not just the ArcGIS framework, to grab data, but we're now moving more into expert type systems. And by saying that, I'm saying we're moving into areas that are really allowing us to take advantage of the tools that have been developed from other disciplines, like computer science and AA, and those would be the areas of deep learning, for example, artificial intelligence, and being able to make some sense out of it and get some meaningful results. So I have a student doing that right now. And really, we're sort of primed to do more of that at LMU. And I think there's an opportunity for students coming here to be able to pursue that rather readily. I've had students working on groundwater pollution problems and cleanup problems. You have a contaminant spill, how do you clean it up? And just working on more of an applied process, how to deal with that. And we actually get to the point where we actually design the well specifically for a problem, and then have them tie that to a particular treatment process. And then what do you do with the water? And it becomes permitting issues. And it all touches on other environmental issues. And just because of the social context that these occur in, right, it opens up other questions, just as a society, how we're dealing with these things. So when we talk about LMU and educating the whole person, these are the things we talk about. It's not just the numbers, right? it's all of it.
Wonderful, thank you. So my last question for you is, in what direction do you see LMU's environmental science and civil engineering programs going towards, and the research that you're doing, and like what direction you're all moving?
Yeah. So so it's an interesting question, because this is a discussion we've been having internally, and what we see happening in our department is that we have a lot of interest in environmental engineering, and many of our students come in with different backgrounds. Like they'll come in, so I want to pursue environmental science, and we actually have a track for them. For some that say, you know, I'd really like to do more environmental engineering. Can I do that? And we actually have a way to move them in that direction, so they'll end up with a degree. Right now it's a degree in civil engineering, but we're looking to perhaps make that an environmental engineering degree. That seems to be where the demand is. But more importantly, the tools that, you know, that I had professionally, and my counterparts had professionally to do the practice of environmental engineering were, you know, centered around our traditional, you know, air pollution, wastewater, water, all those things, which are all important. But the mechanism for evaluating solutions really involves newer technology that's happening right now. And as I said before, with just finding ways to manage large data sets, we call it big data management. That's going to be a key part of our program. Sort of expanding what we're doing right now with remote sensing and satellite imagery. That is becoming more of a focus for us. Sort of refining some of the deep learning models that are out there to allow us to do better forecasting and prediction. That is also a growing area for us. And so all of a sudden, what we foresee in the future for our grad program is exposing our students to those areas, as well as keeping them connected to just the social impact of these changes. You know, we teach, you know, class in sustainability, or I teach a class in economics of water resources. We get in some very specific discussions about impacts, you know, and of course, with the DEI efforts underway in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, that's what we've been about for many years anyway. And so it's an opportunity really to get at the heart of some of these societal issues that I think other engineering programs they're just not going to cover. But we do that here. You know, and I think our students and the companies they work for are better off for it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for answering all of my questions. I want to open up the floor to see if any of our students have any questions for you. So feel free to type your questions in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask the questions, whatever way you're more comfortable.
Hi, Professor. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. I just thought I'd unmute myself and rather than type it out. But I'm curious, you know, in my field, I work for a utility company and I'm interested in this program. What are some of the, you know, coursework that would be, you know, applicable in terms of sustainability? I know that that's a huge topic right now, and that's really seeming like where, you know, environmental work is moving towards. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, you said you work for a utility?
I do, yes.
Like a water utility, electric utility?
I work for the gas company.
Gas company, sure. We've had a few gas company employees in our program come through our program, and we touched on a number of areas there, and whether it was project oriented. Many of our classes are project oriented, and so if you're coming from a utility, of course, one of the things we have all our students take is just an introduction to certain environmental processes. If you have an environmental science background, that takes you in one direction. If you have a more interest in fluid mechanics, where we have a intro to fluids that we have our students take, so we all sort of have working on the same page. But then we go into some other areas, and for example, I teach a class in groundwater management, and yet in that class, in fact, I had a student with the gas company talking about these issues because they were managing that gas reserve over here in the Porter Ranch area with many similarities. And so there was an opportunity really to show her some other techniques that are out there, and sort of have a discussion on how you sort of control what's underground. We have classes in stormwater management, low impact design for water. We also have sustainability classes that talk about better uses of power, whether it's wind power, solar power, and things of that nature. But you would have an opportunity to learn all that. And we also, of course, have courses in engineering.
Did Don just freeze? I think he's on campus too.
Activity, not only just with our engineering schools, but also with the business school. And so if there was something you wanted to pursue more along the business lines, we also have opportunities there for you. But I think from your experience already, I think you would really get a unique perspective on how it looks from a solar waste management person to a water person to a business person. But I can get you in touch with some people that have been through our program if you might be interested in talking to as well.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. I actually don't come from an engineering background. I have an environmental science bachelor's. So do you think that would be conducive, this program, to somebody who just is really passionate about, engineering and trying to get into that kind of sector?
Yes. We've had a number of students with your type of background who actually transitioned to the engineering side, and we have a path on how they end up with a degree. And right now it's a degree in civil engineering, master's degree in civil engineering for that path. And it's not hard to achieve. And I would say roughly, if you were to ask me, I'd say about half of our students that come in the program with environmental science typically switch over to the engineering side, and the others stay in the environmental science side. So that is a unique trait, or unique feature, I should say, of our program here at LMU. But yeah, I think you would do quite well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I've answered a couple of the questions in the chat. Samuel just said hello and gives you a shout out, Dr. Kendall, saying he's happy to learn about the program.
Thank you.
Yes, so unfortunately, we do not have a PhD program in civil engineering, but I know we have students who complete our master's in civil engineering and then go on to PhD programs afterwards. Don, I don't know if you can speak on that a little bit more too.
Yeah, well, I just filled out some recommendations for two of our master students who are going on for the PhDs. One's going to UCLA, and the other one is applying, I believe, to Berkeley and USC, I believe. And so there are some very serious students who want to keep going, and I'm sure they'll do well.
Wonderful. So we have a question about applying for this year. So right now our applications for the summer semester and the fall semester are open. we have rolling admissions for our program. So when you apply to the program, once your application is complete, you usually receive an application or admission decision within, 2 to 3 weeks, depending on if it's finals or not. And so that's kind of how the admission process works. So we hope that if you are interested in it, you can actually start your application now and complete it before, I believe the deadline for the summer is, gosh, maybe like late April, and the deadline or our hope for you to apply for fall, hopefully you apply by the beginning of August, so that we have enough time to review your applications, and then you can get registered for classes. Both of those applications are open, so depending on when you're interested, you are welcome to start your application. And if you have any questions or need any assistance, my office, the graduate admissions office, is here to help you with that. So I will go ahead and put our information in the chat. So if you do have questions, you can reach out to us after this.
And well, I'm less familiar with the mechanics of this. We do have a process where students can get an MBA at the same time, a joint degree. So I probably wouldn't be the one to speak directly, unless perhaps our associate dean is here, Nazwa Ola could speak to it, or maybe Emma, you might want to speak to it. Or
yeah, we have multiple graduate programs with dual degree option in MBA. Means that you can start in civil engineering and then continue to get an MBA degree. You can start in mechanical engineering, civil engineering. I already said that electrical engineering, computer science, systems engineering, all of them have a dual degree option. Means that you start in the engineering, finish the engineering requirements, then continue to get an MBA. The advantage is that you have to take less number of courses if you did it separately, and of course the price is lower than if you did it separately.